It's pretty gross when you find a bug frozen inside an ice cube. And it's always nasty when you discover a 6-year-old pork chop at the back of your freezer encased in ice like a woolly mammoth corpse. But these minor inconveniences are nothing compared to the abject horror you'd experience if you'd unearth the objects we're about to see in our list of 5 terrifying and creepy things discovered frozen in ice. At 5, the casualties of the White War. Have you played that pain-in-the-ass mountain map on Battlefield 1, where the Austro-Hungarians faced the Italian army? You know, the one with the ridiculous suits of armor, and the valley where it's impossible to 360 a Zeppelin? Well, this was the site of the Italian front in World War I, where the Allies fought the Central Power of Austria-Hungary in a series of brutal mountain conflicts in freezing high-altitude conditions. Also known as the White War, these battles later involved the forces of Britain, France, Czechoslovakia, the USA, Romania, and Germany, with nearly 5 million killed or injured on both sides on this front alone. But bullets and bombs weren't the only cause of death, as the occasional avalanche was thrown in for good measure too, such as the one on Friday the 13th of December 1916, which killed 10,000 men in a single day. The remains of soldiers from the White War are still found preserved to this day, and one of the most notable finds occurred in 2012, when the bodies of 2 teenage fighters aged just 16 and 18 were discovered side by side in the Presena Glacier. Fresh corpses are found on an annual basis as our planet heats up and melts these glaciers. And when this happens, archaeologists have to work quickly, as once the ice disappears, these bodies are left exposed to decomposition and the light fingers of ghoulish grave robbers. At 4, the Mumsicle. You don't have to go all the way to the Arctic to find creepy stuff frozen in ice, you know, as one North Carolina woman found out when she purchased a freezer from a yard sale. In June of 2016, 56-year-old Marcella Jean Lee offered a chest freezer for sale to her next-door neighbor for just $30, on the condition that she absolutely positively did not look inside. Marcella claimed it was a time capsule, and that members of her church would come by to collect the contents in a short while. I don't know how Ms. Lee thought this was going to pan out, but her neighbor definitely did look inside. And in there, she found the frozen body of 75-year-old Arma Roche, her neighbor's mother. Wow, her mom's got way more chill than mine. The old woman had died of natural causes, but for some reason her daughter put Mom on ice rather than telling the authorities. Marcella Jean Lee was detained on a $50,000 bond and later charged with the felony of failing to report a death. At number 3, the Frozen Feast. This entry is a little different from the rest because it describes an icy discovery that people knew they had to make, but really didn't want to. In 1972, the Argentinian rugby team Old Christians Club were on a flight to Chile when it crashed into the frozen peaks of the Andes mountain range. 12 passengers died in the crash or shortly thereafter, and a further 6 had perished within the next week. But the real horror was still yet to come, as the remaining 27 had to find a way to survive in these freezing mountain conditions for months. Search parties from 3 countries attempted to find the stricken craft, but the rescue mission was canceled after 8 days, something the survivors found out for themselves by radio. At this point, I think I'd roll up into a ball and start crying. But these guys were made of sterner stuff. They realized they'd have to save themselves. And with next to no food on board this short-haul flight, that meant they would have to consume the flesh of their dead teammates. For 2 long, harrowing months, they survived in these horrific circumstances, at which point 3 players decided for a daring, last-chance, risk-all hike out of the Andes to find help. On the 23rd of December, the remaining survivors were airlifted to safety. In total, 16 of the passengers survived, sadly, living long enough to see the corny Hollywood version of their story come out in 1993. But the reason this tale makes our list is because on the 18th of January 1973, 26 days after the survivors were rescued, a group of men led by a priest traveled to the crash site to bury the dead. And when they did so, they discovered the clear signs of the cannibalism which had occurred here, with the Andes Mountains revealing bits of horror that had taken place over the past 2 months. The priest and his men said nothing, and instead merely gathered what remains were left, buried them in a simple grave, and departed. A few members of the same group later went back to torch the whole place with gasoline just to make sure. But because everyone loves a grisly story, the surviving men were persuaded to admit what everyone knew at a press conference just a few days later, that these poor souls had to eat their friends and teammates to survive. And burning or burying their bones wasn't going to change the memory of that experience for anyone. At 2, the Hidden Valley. Something doesn't have to be creepy, gross, or dead to be terrifying, you know. And you can bet the glaciologists who found a giant canyon frozen in Greenland thought so, as the enormous valley they discovered back in 2013 is almost twice as long as the Grand Canyon. Makes you wonder how something that big can still be discovered in 2016. Don't we have Google Earth for that kind of stuff? Well, the reason this canyon was hard to spot is that it lies frozen under a sheet of ice, several kilometers thick. But by using radar images provided by NASA, a team of glaciologists deduced that beneath this ice sheet lies a 750-kilometer-long mega canyon over 800 meters deep and 10 kilometers wide, making it the longest canyon discovered on Earth to date. And while we now believe we've found everything of note beneath the Greenland ice sheet, glaciologists think there could be equally spectacular finds waiting for us underneath Antarctica. So come on, people! Spray those aerosols in the air and get this planet heated up so we can find out. And at number 1, Franklin's Lost Expedition. In 1845, a group of British explorers led by Captain Sir John Franklin departed on a voyage towards the Arctic, hoping to traverse the last unnavigated area of the Northwest Passage, which is something I hope to achieve on my wedding night. Anyway, Sir Franklin was a famous explorer with 3 expeditions and a strong history of naval service under his belt already. So it came as a huge surprise when he and his men failed to return, all 129 of them. Search parties were launched to find the lost expedition, but despite ships from Britain and the USA taking part, nothing of the explorers or the ship was seen for several years. Until in 1850, an explorer called John Ray heard tales from local Inuit of a white man's expedition off the Canadian Arctic coast. He acquired relics from the Inuit, which seemed to indicate a camp had been set up nearby, and these clues led the search party to Beechey Island, where they discovered the graves of John Torrington, John Hartnell, and William Brain. These men had died early on in the expedition, sometime between January and April 1846, but despite the Navy locating them in 1850, their bodies were not recovered until a scientific exploration in 1984 dug up their well-preserved remains from deep within the permafrost. We discovered then that the 3 men had died from pneumonia and lead poisoning. But what became of the other 126 missing sailors? Finding the answer to this mystery took a lot longer, and we still don't have a complete picture of what happened to this day. While we know that a large proportion of the crew died of pneumonia, lead poisoning, and scurvy, we also have evidence to suggest that many of the survivors also resorted to cannibalism to eke out a few more months of life. Yet, even after over a century of investigations, there are still many whose whereabouts is unaccounted for. In 2014 and 2016, the preserved wreckages of the expedition's 2 ships were found, But it seems the exact fate of most of Franklin's men will remain unknown for some time. And a Strange Mysteries bonus entry. This dead fox. In 2014, Sweden suffered a sudden and severe drop in temperatures which caught out many by surprise. Meh, big deal. Firefox always freezes on me too. The fox was discovered by Jeffrey Sandstrom, who was skating across the lake and then instantly regretted his decision after seeing this poor frozen foxicle poking out of the frost. Other animals to have suffered the same fate included this moose and this entire shoal of fish. And hopefully not that dog. Although, I can't be sure. So that's our list. Did you enjoy seeing all these corpses frozen in ice? What do you think your best friend would taste like? Why don't you find out right now? Or maybe don't do that. And instead, watch our recent video on 7 eye-opening pieces of history they never taught you in school.